Weirding Way Media. Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, where we lift up the stories of women in television. Here are your hosts, Sharon+johnson and Susan+lambert+hatem.
Hello, I'm Susan.
And I'm Sharon. On our last episode, our guest was the incredible Asaad Kelada, and he had so much to tell us. We had to break it into two parts. Here is part two. Buckle up. It's going to be a great ride.
Now he's going to tell us all about Cloris Leachman. Eventually. I promise you we'll get to it.
The pressure that I felt when I got Rhoda Goes to Paris, when I got that one episode, is that, okay, I've been sitting here for 5 years. I have literally 5 days to demonstrate whether
you can do this.
Well, first of all, I learned anything, whether I'm worth putting any more investment in or whatever. And it is unbearable pressure until we started rehearsal. And then something else happened. I was just doing the work.
Did it feel like home?
It felt like home. Valerie and Julie Kavner, whom I knew from San Diego, whatever, they were so welcoming. I felt people were rooting for me because they saw me put in the time. And the script was wonderful. I mean, there was no rewrites. It was just what we read, is what we shot. And it just went well. That was tense day for me was camera blocking, which was the fourth day of the week, because that again, now that is the real, the rest is doing a play. I know how to rehearse. But how do I deal with these 4 cameras, 100 people on stage? Everybody has questions. Everybody needs an answer now. And I'm there and I have to actually move these behemoths, these multiple cameras, whatever. Again, the crew, which I will always bow to, the crew are the unsung heroes. They had seen me. They knew me. I had done my homework as well as I could, and when I stumbled, they were there to offer a suggestion, whatever, and we did it. And the episode was very good.
Do you think it was more difficult for you to break in because you were Egyptian?
I think so. It's only logical. It stands to reason. My name is all these vowels, endless A's in a name. I look different. I sound different. I never tried to be somebody else. I didn't think of changing my name to something more colloquial or whatever. It's just who I am. I never tried to speak differently. And it was not overt, but television for anybody is a closed club. You have to be connected. You have to be somehow supported by somebody or whatever. And I knew no one except for Beverly Sanders, who said, "Mary's my friend. Go to MTM." So for everybody, it is a closed club. For somebody like me, it was even more. The fact that I was allowed to go in and acted on it, I took the initiative, fortunately, to take that chance, to make that leap of faith. But television is Jewish humor. It is, Karl Reiner says that. Books are written on that. It is acknowledged, and it is what makes it brilliant. Fortunately, there is a cadence to the rhythms, to the whatever. That's not far removed from the way I grew up. Maybe that is why I was able to kind of shift. But that makes the club even more insulated. And I knew going in that why would they pay attention to me? I didn't know that, but I know now. Why would they give me a chance? All the odds are against this. It's difficult enough to will James or whatever, but to give a multi-million-dollar show and trust it to somebody. So I had to prove myself. I will be honest, I was not, except a couple of instances that were not even during my time when I was trying to break in. But even since then, that there were overt incidents that were unfortunate. The fact that I was Egyptian or other or this or that. But it was more the gaining credibility, getting past the anonymity of not only being somebody whom nobody knows, but being somebody who is foreign, somebody who is Egyptian, which is alien to this format. All of these aspects were conjoined together to make it really a very, very steep climb. But to answer your question, yes, I'm sure it, if nothing else, it delayed the process. And I've constantly had to demonstrate that I could still be a member of the club. That there's something that a sentence that I wrote in the book, that I could speak the language, even though I may not have the vernacular, still maybe with an accent, but I could speak the language of television. I have to keep proving that. Because as a guest director, every time it was starting over again, having to prove from day one that I can earn your trust, that you can have a good time with me, and that we will do okay by the end of the week. And fortunately, again, I kept doing the work. I kept being prepared. I never took it for granted. I never assumed it was now mine to have. I had to keep earning it. So,
you worked with James Brooks and Alan Burns. Did you also work with Charlotte Brown, the staff writer who became the Rhoda showrunner? The first
yes, well, she was a writer when I first met her. I don't think she was a producer yet. She might have been, because again, I spent so much time. But I knew her at a distance, as I did with everybody else. She was also a friend of Beverly Sanders, who got me into observing Rhoda. So eventually I did get to meet Charlotte, and when I did my first episode, she was a producer by then. And she, I remember, was one of the primary supporters. I felt that she was kind of lifting me up, and you can do it, and this is finally you're where you needed to be. And then after I left the show, after I directed Rhoda, and when I was going on to other stuff and we'd run into one another, she was always cordial and warm, and people tend to move on from those they work with. We're all, again, replaceable that way, because everybody's meeting hundreds of people all the time. But I always felt with Charlotte that I was identified. I was always somebody that she had a relationship with. So I remember her very, very fondly. And no question, she was brilliant at what she did as a writer and as a producer.
And I want to shout out MTM for putting women on staffs, putting Egyptians behind the camera.
Well, absolutely.
That was very progressive for the time, and very unusual.
Now that you bring that up, that is very true. Now that I think back, MTM had a lot of women writers, women producers. I remember on Rhoda, there were several of them. Pat Nardo, I think, was another writer. So yes, a shout out to MTM for that. Grant Tinker and Mary were remarkable. That place was a home for everybody there. And the thing, just because Grant Tinker played a big part in my life, the thing that set him apart is that he was vociferous in his support of the talent working with him. He was what I'm using all these big words, but he was a barrier between the suits or the people who were the executives and the artists and the writers. He gave writers full freedom. He never interfered, which was unique. I remember when I couldn't get over the fact, coming from the theater, that you get to do a show and then a whole army of people would come in, everybody with their notes and pads and whatever. Grant, who was the head of the company, was only there to support. And if a writer needed somebody to be a barrier or a filter. So anyway, he was truly a talent lover, supporter, and I can vouch for it on a personal level. It was wonderful. And she was an ally. Absolutely. And when I started working, she was a supporter, and I was exceedingly fond of her. She was a wonderful producer, a wonderful writer, and she became a friend. She was supportive. But again, these relationships were formed after I started to work. Yeah. I knew them. After a while, I was unavoidable. I just was always there. I wondered when they would look at me, and now they would wave at me and say hello, whatever, but were they looking at an insane man, or were they looking at somebody who was just determined? Constantly, it was always that, who am I here, and how am I being perceived? Mm-hmm. By persisting. Either this was somebody who was really deluded. When does he take no for an answer? How long does he wait? And I really feel that I just outlasted. I outlasted the no. Give him one, for God's sake. Just get him out of here.
It's a strategy.
It's a strategy.
And a winning.
And clearly a winning. But Yale School of Drama is not a slouch school.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's a paradox because it really doesn't have much weight in television. But now, as a director and a producer, and when I was sitting on the other side of the table as auditioners came in, when we looked at the resume and it said Yale School of Drama, everybody sat up because you knew there was a work ethic, there was a training, there was something behind it. It was not just somebody who is beautiful or witty or is fun at parties who says, I can be an actor, but somebody who committed to a career. So I thought that this would be my calling card, and it was in the theater to some extent. But again, the theater is lean pickings unless you're with a company or with. So anyway, I still look at my diploma and I say Yale School of Drama. Yeah, okay.
Wait, so you were just saying that you directed the pilot of Family Ties while you were doing The Facts of Life?
Yes.
That was a year.
Yes. Oh, well, I went out a lot. When I was directing The Facts of Life, I would go off as a guest director. I would ask people would want me to go as a visiting director. And Gary Goldberg was a very close friend of mine because I had directed his very first series, which was called The Last Resort. And it ran for 16 episodes. It was really a wonderful series that, given had it been at another time, it was a precursor to Friends in some ways because it was about young people working in the Catskills, and it was beautifully written and funny and a great looking cast. Anyway, so Gary and I had first met him when I directed the Tony Randall Show, and he and Hugh Wilson were the producers. So I met both of them. As a result of that, I started working with Gary, and then I ended up working with Hugh on WKRP. So all these relationships, if they're solid, if they're good relationships, if they're enhanced, they reverberate over time. Because I worked with Gary on The Last Resort, and it was an enjoyable experience, and the show was getting numbers that would make it a huge hit now. Right. But at the time, if you didn't get, 40 million people a night, it was, so he wrote the script, said, I have a very special script that is close to my heart that I want you to read. And I read it. It was Family Ties. And I called him back immediately and I asked him to promise me that if it's ever picked up, that I can direct it. And I directed it. I was working on The Facts of Life at the time, so I took that time. They gave me the time to do the pilot. And that's why I wasn't the director on Family Ties, because I wanted to stay loyal to The Facts of Life. So I went back to Family Ties and directed several episodes every year throughout the run. But I would have loved to be on Family Ties all the time because it was a joyous experience. But that's how I did it.
So from the get-go, did you guys think this is going? Do you know?
The night of shooting that show, you could touch it in the air. Every single time Michael J. Fox, bless him, walked on stage, the audience went crazy. And he made history that night in the sense that, to tell you how connected he was to the part, is that there is a scene in the kitchen and his girlfriend calls and his sister, the young sister, makes fun of him. Your girlfriend. He picks up the phone and he says, hello, Alex P. Keaton. P was not in the script. His name was Alex Keaton. And he just ad-libbed that. And the minute he said P, because it was not heard at any other time in the episode, the audience roared. And Gary looked at me and he said, we're in. and it became Alex P. Keaton from that point on. But he was so... Not only him, everybody. It was a charmed cast. It was
the family,
family was, and they were assembled kind of not haphazardly over a long period of time, but you're picking people who've never seen each other. And they became a family 2 days into the rehearsal. This is what capturing lightning in a bottle is, that cliche. It really is. It's like with Who's the Boss? Putting Tony and Judith and Catherine together, and the young Alyssa and
it's lightning in a bottle. I mean, it's serendipity. It's whatever luck,
And something happens.
Yeah.
Something happens.
Yeah.
And,
Michael J. Fox was unknown.
Michael J. Fox was a last-minute casting. Gary wanted Broderick.
Matthew Broderick.
Matthew Broderick. And he was sold on him. And Matthew Broderick was cast. And then he called Carrie and he said, I had to drop off because his dad, James Broderick, the actor, was very sick and he wanted to spend time with him. So he went to New York. And Gary said, Matthew, man, he is... And then casting director Judith Weiner said, I have this young man who is brilliant. You will like him. He's not Matthew. He said, just read him. So he read him. He liked him, but he was still caught on the other thing. He read him again. I was working on facts, so I wasn't in on those readings. But Gary would tell me, I saw this young guy. He's just terrific. I can't get him off my mind. He's not Matthew Broderick. But finally, I was in Gary's office when Michael called to find out if he was cast. And Gary told him, you have the role, and I could hear the scream. Later, we found out that Michael used practically his last dime. He was leaving Los Angeles. He was going to go back to Canada because he was not getting work, and he said, okay, this is not for me. If he had not gotten this role, he would have gone to Canada. He got it during the week. Every day he demonstrated there was something extraordinary about him, but he was insecure. And he came to me one day and he said, are they going to fire me? I said, what are you talking about, Mike? He said, I don't know. I think he was almost afraid to trust everything that was in him. Can I keep doing the stuff that's coming out of me? And I said, just hang on. We had that run through immediately after our conversation. Producers and writers were screaming. It was brilliant. And I said, there's your answer. And he became Michael J. Fox.
And Justine Bateman and Tina Yothers. Amazing.
Tina Yothers.
Meredith Baxter, Michael Gross. Yeah, amazing cast.
Really lovely people.
And they really did fit.
They fit, and they were very different backgrounds.
Yeah.
Justine had not acted at all.
She was brand new.
She was brand new. She was a model, a child model. Elise, Meredith Baxter had this enormous amount of history, mainly on television. So she came with that. The father, Michael Gross, was from the theater. He was cast at the very last minute because a tape was sent from New York. He had not even been out here. He was working in the theater in New York. And we watched the tape at Brandon Tartikoff's office, and we said, okay, this is him. The cast was complete, but he was from the theater, and so he came with a completely different discipline. Tina Yothers was a child actress, so she was the one who just came and was herself, and she was terrific. So it was all kind of from disparately assembled, and then they just found themselves. The one big adjustment that I remember did have to be made during the pilot rehearsals is that Michael was theatrical. And Gary's vision for that role was the subtlety, saying he was the center of gravity by reacting, not acting. He was the one that you knew was the steady voice. All the other people, Michael, the young activist, or Justine Bateman was the shopaholic and they wanted to do this, and Alex P. Keaton, who's a Nixon follower, whatever, they're all on their own bent. But the father was the steady. The father and the mother were the steady ones. And so the work that had to be done was to bring Michael Gross down, to make, because he was from the theater.
Right,
he was playing to the balcony.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it had to be brought down. It was really interesting to see it come together, but the night we filmed it, it was clear.
Was that the first time you'd had an opportunity to be involved at the beginning of one of the shows and be involved in the casting and bringing?
No, I was involved before, but this was certainly the first time with something as enormously successful as this was, because I had directed other pilots before, The Last Resort with Gary, and I was involved with casting throughout. When I was on Facts of Life, I was always there, but this felt like something that was really being born in front of us.
There are lots of, I'm sure, good shows, good pilots that are out there that for whatever reason didn't resonate with an audience. Were there others that you did that you thought, that it was inexplicable why it couldn't figure out why?
Yes. Well, the Last Resort, it was inexplicable why it was canceled. Because it was successful. It was doing very well. But again, relative to the times, not well enough, I guess, in those numbers. The other, I did a pilot with Michael Keaton that ran for a few episodes. But again, the flip side of that is that everybody knew that he was brilliant, but the concept is not fully baked. So you can tell. We all knew that Family Ties, that the pilot was unique. We just didn't know that it would take off the way it did the night we filmed it, because the reaction was really unlike anything anybody had experienced, where it just said, we know these people, we want them, we want to be with them every week, roaring and accepting, just embracing them.
Lightning in a bottle.
Lightning in a bottle.
Like Who's the Boss?
Very good segue. Whoa.
How did you get involved in Who's the Boss?
Okay, an interesting connection. When I went to meet Grant Tinker, and he gave me his advice, he said, also, if you need to talk to somebody, go talk to Marty Cohen. Marty Cohen is a director who works occasionally on Rhoda, and he may give you some advice. I never did get to talk to Marty. Other things took place. I directed WKRP, and the first episode I did was written by Blake Hunter. It was called Less on a Ledge. And Les Nessman.
Les Nessman, yes.
is standing on a ledge wanting to kill himself because he was somebody misunderstood something. So he was accused of being gay. And at the time, that was anathema. Anyway, it was a wonderful script, very funny, and gave me my inroad into WKRP, which then I was a part of throughout its history. So Blake Hunter wrote that episode, and by that time, I think there was word out that I was good with actors, that harmony was always established on the set. People got along, everybody was happy. And apparently, the Who's the Boss set was in turmoil the week before the episode that I was to direct.
Right in the middle of a
story.
Yeah.
I heard of a story of a conflict with the then director, and that a chair or a ladder was involved in the altercation between Tony and the director. So there was strife on the set. I was told that that was one of the reasons they said maybe I would be good, but also my name was becoming part of at least the conversation. So I was given 2 episodes also. the trial period. And when I got there, it was wonderful to reconnect with Blake and relive WKRP. And I told Marty that he was going to be the one to give me some career advice, which he never did.
Could you do it now,
if
please?
he has it now, I'm still listening. I did the episode. The first episode was just a fun episode of Tony and his cronies going to
And it's Sports
Vegas.
Buddies, but it's Tony Danza.
Tony
but
Danza.
That's the one you directed.
Buddies that they go to Vegas.
She's dating someone, and he is a fan of Tony Danza's character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they go to Vegas. And that went well. Tony was still, he hadn't made up his mind exactly who I was or whatever, but it was peaceful. The people who were magical to me were Judith and Catherine. They were, again, they're from the theater, so we had our language we could speak, and they were so generous and supportive. I felt they were my cushion. I could have a soft landing with them. I felt wonderful, and the episode went well. The second episode was called Requiem, and it was a very personal episode to Tony based on his own life experience when his dad died. It's about Tony, and he seems to disappear, and nobody can find him. He comes back into the house, and then he disappears again. Mona, of course, thinks he's being pursued by the mob. That's that funny aspect of it. But we discovered that his dad's apartment, which he still maintained and had to have a second job to pay the rent for that, was still kept. His dad died around Christmas, and it was still left intact with the Christmas decorations and the Christmas tree and whatever. And it's about Tony coming to terms with his dad's passing and letting go, moving on with his life. It was a very, very delicate, sensitive, and emotional episode. And this is when Tony and I connected. We worked very closely. I talked about our fathers. We talked about loss and all of that. And the episode was very special. And Tony did wonderful work. I mean, he found aspects of himself that people had not seen, just his emotionality and so forth. So we connected well. And he was very pleased with the episode, and he felt safe and protected. I remember going to a party after we shot the episode, and I just said, God, it would be nice to stay with this group. I wonder if it's reciprocal. I got a call a short while later, and Tony and Blake and Marty decided they wanted me to do the series. So that's how it happened. And then I started with these 2 episodes, and I was there for 4 years.
Amazing.
It's break time. We'll be right back. We're back.
You got to do the First Kiss episode, and that's the one I was thinking of that had Jeff Conaway as a guest.
The First Kiss with Tony and...
Yeah, because they get drunk.
Yes.
He gets drunk with his friend.
Yes.
Danny
Pintoro. Danny Pintoro. Oh, forgive me, Danny. So sorry. Okay.
Here, say it
in my heart.
Say it one more time so we have it.
Danny Pintoro.
One more.
Thank you, Danny. Danny Pintoro.
Perfect. Yeah, so that was different styles of actors, right? You have Mona is from the theater.
Catherine
Hellman's from the theater and from soap.
And that was a delicate balance. I mean, distinctly, I remember it very clearly. Tony did not like to rehearse a lot. He had photographic memory. He was off book the second day, so everybody had to scramble to keep up with him. Very, very intuitive, very quick. He really was terrific and connected to that part. A lot of it was him, but he also was one to rehearse a lot. Judith and Catherine were theater actors, and they just, the image that I have is that with them, they wanted to speak in paragraphs. Tony wanted to speak in sentences, short sentences. So I had to balance those 2 things, how to keep Tony's impatience. If I'd be talking to them, he'd say, hey, come on now, guy, let's go to work. Come on. It was his set. So I had to learn the key words that would resonate with Tony, and he and I developed a vocabulary, a language. He knew what I was thinking. So after a while, it was almost unspoken. And with Judith and Catherine, it was more about maybe what the scene was about and what the character is doing here or there. But again, briefly, succinctly. And then also young children. Danny and Alyssa were really young.
They were.
Sharp as a tack. Alyssa was enchanting and he was adorable. But it is how to keep that spontaneity that they have naturally. How to keep that. You can muffle that if you over-direct it, if you try to make them do something, as opposed to have them do what they do, but channel it where we want it. So it was a combination of languages I was speaking in rehearsal, and we found a rhythm, all of us. We found a balance that seemed to work for everyone. It was primarily, predominantly a happy set. Tony was very volatile. He is Italian to the hilt, and he is uncensored. So whatever he came to the set with that morning kind of colored the day, but everybody loved each other and were very genuinely close and genuinely committed to the show. The first year, we were all finding our path, our track. Judith was having a bit of difficulty again to balance her role in the play and her role on the set and all of these personal and professional, all of these things. And that is where I believe that directing on television shows where everything is so compacted and so, in a way, surface, if you don't hit the right note quickly, then you could really lose your position, whatever, that it is a matter of creating a group, having everybody feel that they're part of something larger than what the yellow marker is on the script of the week. And that this is about something and that everybody's treated equally and everybody's loved and respected and all of that. This to me this is what I lead with, whether rightly or wrongly. Some people may think it's a waste of time, and maybe it is, but this is what I do. It's about the people. And so, in spite of the different backgrounds and the different methodologies and techniques, the thing that was in common is that everybody genuinely cared for one another. And the show was fun. And Tony was the leader in that. He was larger than life. He was joyous. He came in and he was inventive and he made everybody feel good until he didn't. And then we got past it. I mean, he would come one day and he'd say, "This is shit. I need to throw the script in the trash and walk away." And then they'd say, Asaad, what do we do? Go talk to him. And then I'd put him there, we'd talk, whatever. That was part of my role also, is to maintain the equilibrium, maintain the peace, and also get the show on its feet.
Get the show on the thing. So I guess you answered the question of who's the boss.
And the question was, who's the boss? No, who's the boss? There was no question.
In looking at your stuff, I had to watch a couple episodes of Benson.
I did a couple of episodes.
You did?
But there were a couple of episodes. You watched my entire repertoire.
I know. But come on.
Such a good show, though.
The bugging the governor's office episode is off the hook.
Oh,
it's so delightful.
Thank you.
That scene in the bathroom, you got to tell me.
Well, I have to remind myself, frankly.
So Benson discovers there are bugs in the governor's mansion, in the kitchen and the office. And so they keep meeting in the young daughter's bedroom where they have to sit in the little kid chairs. And in the bathroom, there's this one downstairs bathroom that's not bugged. It's so much physical comedy. It's so ridiculous.
I remember.
It's the three of them, Robert Guillaume and James Noble and
Ingus Benson. Who is
not Inga. She's not in the bathroom.
No.
But the other guy, the assistant guy.
Yes.
Anyway, but they are.
I can't remember.
It's fantastic. Yeah. And then there's Ingus Benson and Missy Gold. Everybody gets a moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, this was early in my career.
Yeah.
The Benson thing, and it was. It was a spin-off of Soap.
Yeah.
And so this was a big deal. And Tony Thomas, and I was a bit intimidated going there.
Yeah.
But again, I remember going in and I was a day in, I just felt they said, this guy knows what he's doing. And we all became a family. And interestingly, after that, Robert Guillaume and I became very good friends. He was his neighbor, and he just felt, I think we developed an affinity, he and I. I'm not quite sure where it came from, whether because there was something subliminal that he was a very soulful man, and of just being the other, working here, both doing well, but that there is something to life more than what we're doing. We just communicated on that level a lot, and we became very close. The governor, James Noble, was like a floating ethereal presence. I could, he was lovely, but he was just, can I hold you?
Yes.
Can we talk? And so anyway, I really don't have a distinct recollection of that episode, except that the 2 episodes I directed there were lovely. And I still get an occasional $7 Benson
Nice.
that is
Mailbox money, yes.
Buys you a cup of coffee. All right.
I really want to ask about an episode of one of the shows we've covered that you directed. You did an episode of Designing Women.
Yes.
The episode was called Picking a Winner. And I wonder what, if any, memories of that you can share.
The memories of that is that there was a problem on the set and the director left.
Really?
I was brought in the 2nd or 3rd day.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I had to kind of pull it together
right.
and get it together. And I just remember how lovely those ladies were. I said, what can be better than working on a set with nothing but women? And it's just lovely. They were just delightful. There was an actress who had just joined the cast.
Yeah, it was after.
She was from Saturday Night Live, wasn't she?
Jan Hooks.
Jan Hooks.
Yes.
I think that may have been very early in her tenure, if not the first one. I don't know. But it was early in her tenure. Mm-hmm. And of course, Annie Potts was delightful. And so my recollection of this is just like a blur of being called and said, come in. Go to Designing Women. It's the 3rd day of rehearsal or the 2nd day of rehearsal. And I just had to learn, because I always made it my job to learn about the show before I went in. I would visit the set or whatever. I couldn't do any of that. I just had to show up and get my ducks in order and wing it. Yes.
Did that happen on any of the other directing jobs that you got, where you were kind of tossed in the deep end like that?
No, this was the only time where I was brought in to replace someone else. Although it was a different circumstance, but I directed Chuck Lorre's very first series.
Oh.
A very short-lived series called Franny's Turn.
Yeah.
Franny's Turn. It was with Miriam Margolyes, who's a British character actress.
Oh, yes.
And it was the first time Chuck Lorre had a series on the air. It was very short-lived. And he had done a pilot that was directed by someone else. And I guess he didn't get along or whatever. He wanted another director for the series. So I was brought in after that, and I directed the 5 episodes following. And that was a very, very difficult show for reasons that not Chuck was
I was going to say
No, and Chuck and I then worked together again after that on Dharma and Greg and
we did another show with him.
2.5 Men. But this show was difficult just because the casting was unfortunate. It was just not well cast. She was British. Her husband was Cuban who didn't speak English. And so he was in an American sitcom where there were rewrites every hour and he couldn't speak English. So try to imagine. I mean, it was laughably.
It was like a sitcom.
Yes.
That until it became really devastating because there wasn't a single shooting night with my heart went to him. He was a nervous wreck. He couldn't speak English. And you're doing a sitcom where the lines are changed every hour. So, and Chuck it was his first series. So she, of course, was very intense about it. He's intense to begin with. But we developed our relationship and we became friends. And then I worked with him again.
That's
happily.
Fantastic.
Okay. I think the only person we haven't asked about that was on my list is Cloris Leachman.
Oh, Cloris
Phyllis
Leachman.
and Facts of Life.
No.
Yeah.
Did you work with her on Facts of Life?
No, I didn't work with her on the Facts of Life.
Okay.
It was Phyllis and 2.5 Men.
And 2.5 Men.
Phyllis was my second episode ever after Rhoda questions her life and goes to Paris. I was given that episode. I said, that's wonderful. That's 4 episodes in my debut year. So I was in heaven. The episode was Mother Dexter's Wedding, which was the biggest episode they've done up to that point. And it was Phyllis's grandmother. She's in her 90s, and she's getting married to her swain, to her beau, who's in his 90s. 2 wonderful, lovely people with Cloris Leachman in the middle. Okay, so when I got the episode, I was told, okay, beware of Cloris Leachman, because she's a handful. I went to Jay Sandrich, whom I had met during my years of observing, who had worked with her. I mean, I met him once briefly. He didn't know me, but I kind of girded my courage, and I went to him and asked if he would give me some pointers, because he knew her. And I will never forget how generous he was. He said, let's go to the set. And we walked to the set. We talked about it because it was a huge episode with crowds, the wedding scene, and all of that. He said, the one thing, be careful of Cloris, because she may want to take over the set, but she's a professional though. But she's always changing things, whatever. And she said, the other thing is that she's a flirt. So you can use that to maybe tame her.
Can he? Okay.
I tamed only to this extent. So we did the show. The show went very well. It was a delightful episode. And then when I was doing 2.5 Men, and she was, by the way, very flirtatious. She said, I went to meet her at the table, and I said, I'm Egyptian. I did this. She said, and the eyes connected. All of that was fine. And then several years later, I got 2.5 Men, and Chuck said, well, we have somebody you worked with before. Cloris Leachman is the guest actress. Now, that was years later.
Yes.
And of course, years in my life that were multiplied because my life had changed so much. So the only kind of little anecdote is that we sat at the table for the table read, and I went to her and I said, Miss Leachman, Cloris, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Asaad Kelada. We worked on Phyllis. And she said, oh, yes, of course, the Egyptian. So there it was. And it was coming full circle.
You were in.
I was in.
I'm also fascinated because it was a time of young stars. So Missy Gold, Alyssa Milano, Danny Pintaro. Thank you. And then all the Facts of Life cast. You were working with a lot of young people, like in some who shot to stardom, some who left the business, some who struggled. Mm-hmm. I was just curious about your thoughts on that. I'm not sure what my question is.
Well, I have marveled at how, first of all, at the ones who really shot into the stratosphere. Top of them all, of course, is because he is in his own firmament with Michael Fox. But the thing that I found myself thinking more about were the ones who didn't. And I've thought a lot about why did that happen? Or what was it by choice? Or was it how to deal with the pitfalls and with the challenges of success? There were those people who were able to parlay it to more success and learned from it and managed to find their way through it, and others who either were dazzled too early by it and made wrong decisions. And I could see that. And I remember talking with Todd. I ran into him a while back later, and he's doing very well now. But he went through a turbulent time in his life.
Todd Bridges,
that's it. Who was on Different Strokes.
Right.
Yeah, he went through very difficult.
I mean, that seriously troubled. And then he managed to find his way back in a completely different persona and doing very well. These are the things that I find myself thinking about. And I always look at it as a continuum. that you can find your moment and it's a kind of firecracker and it goes up and flashes and it's brilliant and then it goes, or it becomes a steady kind of life path, and how you negotiate that. From my own experience, it never stopped being a challenge, a more enjoyable one as things got better. But one of the things that maybe this relates to your question, one thing that I learned is that it is equally treacherous when you are very successful as when you're trying to get your foot through the door in terms of keeping the sense of who you are. And the pressure that is when you're up on top, and the pressure that when you're trying to get through the door, there may be different kinds of pressure, but they're equally intense. The pressure that I found doing very well is to avoid falling, and you can't avoid falling into the trap of, I've got to maintain this. I've got to do everything I can to make sure this does not change. And I caught myself getting in that at one point, and decisions were made and so forth. But this is a roundabout way of trying to answer your question or prodding me, is that the challenges are always present. Personal challenge. There are challenges in all professions, but I think we're always being tested on a personal level because it is so ephemeral. It is so unpredictable. You are always dispensable. You are always replaceable. Even when you're sitting on the throne, it could change in a matter of months. And then you are yesterday's news. That to me is a phenomenon that does not exist in any other profession. And how and why we voluntarily choose to put ourselves through that day in and year out is because, again, the rewards, apart from the tangible rewards, which are kind of obscenely over, they're outrageous in their excessiveness, but also the rewards are from the fact the ego gets rewarded in no other way. And the sense that you are part, going back full circle, that you are part of a very exclusive club. And you are being recognized now for it.
You're no longer the alien sitting out there in the dark.
But the question is, and the challenge is, do you ever get rid of that feeling if it is intrinsic to who you are? You are a member of the club, but it is a temporary membership. It is a membership that can be withdrawn. It is never a life guarantee. So this is part of what makes it so tantalizing, is that you're always in the process of getting somewhere or holding on to something or making yourself relevant. Yes. At every given point. And I can only say, as my thought here, is that I have been inordinately lucky. I may have worked hard, I may have done this or done that, but I have been very lucky in that I have been welcomed into the club and I have been recognized in it, rewarded while being in it. And my life is very filled with the memories and with the people who have become a part of my existence. So I thank the times that were.
I think that's it. I think we, often at the end of these, Sharon turns to me and is like, this is amazing. We just had an amazing interview. And I'm just going to say it right here. We do that after the guest left usually, but this has been amazing. I clearly could talk to you. We could pick your brain all night. Thank you for being so patient. Thank you for telling your stories. And it's been delightful to have you.
Thank you so much for having me and for putting up with my endless verbiage. But thank you. And thank you for doing what you're doing and throwing the light on ladies who need to be re-acknowledged. Thank you very much for having me.
You're so welcome. As Susan said, we'd be happy to sit here and talk to you for the rest of the evening, because you're talking to us about something that's very near and dear to our heart, and the history of television and the history of the ladies and the men who were part of making it happen for us and for the rest of the audience. And it's been a joy. It really has.
Thank you so very much.
In today's audiography, find out more about Asaad Kelada at imdb.com. The link will be in our description.
You can watch The Facts of Life for free on the Roku channel and Tubi, and just search all the other 40 shows he worked on.
And we highly recommend the Television Academy Foundation interviews with Asaad Kelada. You can find them on YouTube, and we'll have a link in our description.
And if you're looking for ways to help and hang in there, I recommend donating or helping Democracy Docket, the ACLU, and abortion funds, particularly local ones. We'll have some links in our description. Next up, soon we'll be talking with the 90s TV babies about the facts of life. We're going to teach them a thing or two.
I can't wait to hear what the 90s TV babies have to say about the facts of life. I don't even know what to expect. I don't know if they've even heard of it, let alone watched any episodes. I just know it's going to be great.
And you know what? It turns out we haven't yet decided which episodes of The Facts of Life we should show them. So listeners, what do you think? What episodes of The Facts of Life would you like us to assign the 90s TV babies to watch? Which ones will really represent the show in such a way? Send us your top 5 episodes.
Send us your thoughts at 80stvladies.com or email us at 80stvladies@gmail.com.
Now, take care of yourself out there. Take care of your friends and family. I have to remind myself all the time, we start where we are and we do what we can. Look for joy, spread kindness, stay active, and hang in there.
As always, we hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous old and new shows to watch, all of which will bring us closer toward being amazing ladies of the 21st century. See you next time.